My name's Andrew, for those of you that don't know me. I've been in the industry for about 14 years, approaching 15 years. I started as a part-time trainer way back. I did that, put myself through university doing that. I also played a lot of higher level varsity sports. I was a track athlete, I did football. I held a sub-junior provincial powerlifting record there for a while. I also have competed in some different bodybuilding and physique shows. So I've done a lot of different things. I'm a pretty determined person, so I've always done fairly well at them. But generally what I found is for every ounce of determination I have, I tend to lack in talent. So I tend to always be a bridesmaid a little bit. So I do well, but just not the best. So is anyone here taking a course with DTS education before? Okay, quite a few of you. So for those of you that haven't, I'll introduce you to DTS Fitness Education. First, I'd like to thank the gentleman on the camera and the staff that hooked us up here. Thank you all for coming out and taking time away from your businesses and your families. I know that it can be hard to find that time, and I really appreciate you being here today. So for DTS Fitness Education, just so I can give you guys a little bit of an idea of what we do and how we do it, knowledge applied is our tagline. So our big focus is that everything that you learn from us is something that you can actually apply to your personal training business or to your life or a loved one's life, something that'll actually contribute. So we really try to distill things down into what's usable. We've all heard the phrase that knowledge is power. We're a big believer that it's how you apply the knowledge that makes it powerful. So it's knowledge, if it's not being used, we wouldn't, it's not something that we would try to really add into our course. So what ends up happening is we end up doing a lot of fundamentals, because fundamentals for the most part, does the vast majority of the work. If you don't build a nice strong foundation, it doesn't matter what you build on top. Now our vision is the lens through which we do everything, and our vision is longevity and pain-free living for everyone. So whenever we design a course, that's the lens that we're trying to that we're looking through when designing that course. So whether it's a barbell course, a hypertrophy course, conditioning, or anything like that, the lens is through longevity and pain-free living for everyone. And I'm going to give you a little bit of outline of some of the things that I hope to go through today. I wanted to make sure that everyone tried to walk away with something, whether or not you were looking for some nutrition nuggets, whether or not you wanted to, so this is a nerd safari. If you want to go on a nerd safari, that's what I love doing. But again, it has to be applicable knowledge. So then we have nutritional strategies and meal planning, and we're also going to talk about our DTS FLIP system. FLIP stands for Fat Loss Programming System. So before I get into any of those details, I'm just going to cover a brief so that we're on the same page when it comes to fat loss. So the first two pillars there are compliancy and caloric deficit. So those two pillars are needed for any successful weight loss program. If you don't meet those two pillars, you're probably not going to you will not have a successful weight loss program. What makes fat loss different is when we add in, can you see it all? I feel like I'm in a bad spot here. Let's go over here. There we go. What makes the fat loss program is when we add in factoring in our macronutrients and exercise. So let's talk about the fat loss of science. We're going to start with a brief fat cell review. So this is just so that we can contextualize, so that we can understand what's happening when we communicate with our clients, and hopefully we can try to get a little bit more of a commitment from them. And we're going to try to keep this really simple. So here we have our basic fat cell. What matters, the need to know information about a fat cell is that it has a reservoir, and the reservoir is where we store fatty acids for energy. A lot of people don't realize that fat cells actually do a lot of other amazing things. They contribute to your body in that they help regulate different systems with hormones, and they also pump out some signaling proteins as well. So when we have that fat cell, we've all seen that big hunk of fat that we use to show people the difference between muscle density and fat density. A lot of gyms have it, that big yellow jelly blob. So that's kind of made up of a bunch of these fat cells, which is filled with these reservoirs. Now, when we fill up the reservoir, the fat cell grows. That's essentially what's happening. Now, when we're young, what can actually happen is when that reservoir reaches its saturation point, it can actually create a new adipocyte, a new fat cell. And this is one of the biggest issues with childhood obesity. So when you talk to your clients or whenever you're dealing with somebody that may have been obese when they're a child, there's some extra factors there that you need to be aware of. They're going to be operating generally with more fat cells, which can be a little bit of a problem. And I'll show you why. So here on the far left, we have our starting point, and then those fat cells are going to expand. They expand to the point where they reach their full saturation point. So they start to, through fibroblasts, create new fat cells. Now, even when we diet down and we get our fat cell, we get those reservoirs back down to their original point, we now have more cells, and we now have a larger area that's covered. So let's talk about how we get fat. So we know that we need to fill up those reservoirs and they need to expand. Now, you don't have fibroblasts, you don't create new fat cells once you're kind of later in life, once you're an adult or later. So that's one of the benefits. If you save your getting fat stage till you're 30 years old, it's a little bit better because you can reverse it a little bit easier. So the old equation, calories in versus calories out equals your change in body weight. So this equation is true. The problem is it's very hard to measure calories in and calories out. So a lot of people, we've all heard the term a calorie is in a calorie, and that's because we get different net calories, a different net amount of energy from protein versus carbs versus fats. Also, there's different rates of absorption relative to the food and different things like that. So when you're thinking about this equation, I put the word net in there. Think net. So your net is how much you're taking in, and you may not be able to accurately count the number of calories in every single piece of food, but what we do know is if it's consistent, then we have a consistent amount of food that we can adjust. For the calories out, we have the same issue. We can't necessarily gauge every day at every minute what our total expenditure is, but we know that it'll be fairly consistent or within a range. So we can definitely manipulate our calories out by adjusting our activity, and we can manipulate our calories in so long as we're consistent so we know what it is that we're doing. But essentially, we have to satisfy that equation to have some sort of change in body weight. Okay, so this is a case study number one. So this is how we get fat, or how somebody who thinks that they maybe they should be seeing results, maybe why they're not. So for this person, they should be eating 2,350 calories per day just to maintain their body weight. So you're going to be giving them, let's say, a recommendation of 2,000 calories per day. They say to you, well, that's not going to work because I currently eat 1,350. Has anyone had this happen before, where you're sitting in a consultation like, well, I already eat way less? Yeah, a lot of us have. So let's take a look at what this person might be doing. So this is what happens when my wife has a great term for it. She calls them BLTs, bites, licks, and tastes. So just little things that people don't count and how they can accumulate over the course of a day. So the first thing this person does, they toss in some cream or coconut milk in their coffee. It's a small amount. They don't really count it. Just a splash, meh. They have another coffee around 10 a.m. I screwed up the order here a little bit. Then they add some extra ketchup to their eggs. So maybe they're like me, and I like a little extra ketchup with my omelet. So if you tell me, oh, you can have, if a serving's going to be 2 tablespoons of ketchup, guys, I'm way over 2 tablespoons of ketchup. So let's say they're a little bit more like me in terms of ketchup on their omelet. They may have some peanut butter with their midday snack. Maybe they don't have a snack and they get pretty hungry before lunch, so they just toss a spoonful of peanut butter in their mouths. A lot of people tend to do that. And again, it's not a measured tablespoon. It's just that small spoon we all have in our kitchen that we use, and it's not measured. Okay, after that, they have their lunch. On their lunch, they do a free pour with their salad dressing. So it's not actually measured again. It's just a free pour. So they're just eyeballing. Pretty much everybody that eyeballs dressing tends to overshoot. Then let's say this person, I had a lot of people that do this. Everyone thinks of nuts as a healthy snack, that they're okay. They're low carb. There's lots of different reasons why people think of nuts. So let's say they drive around for work. They've got a big bag of nuts that they bought from Costco in their glove compartment. That's what they snack on, maybe in between client sessions or whatever it is that they're doing. So just taking a few handful of nuts here and there throughout the afternoon. Or maybe it's added in as their snack, but they're not properly portioning it. Then we get to their dinner. A lot of people love to put olive oil on their food. So let's say dinner is, they're doing a barbecue. So they're having some sort of barbecued meat. They're tossing some vegetables on the barbecue, peppers, asparagus, zucchini, whatever. They toss olive oil on there, but they didn't count it because it's just a drizzle. It's not a ton. And then again, they do another free pour on the salad that they have. So this is all the BLTs that they've had throughout the day. This is what it roughly adds up to. I did, between 2 coffees, 3 tablespoons, not a ton, tablespoon and a half between each, 1/4 cup of ketchup, 2 tablespoons peanut butter, and you guys kind of get the point. From there, that's a total of an extra 1,000 calories roughly. Yeah, those are just BLTs. They're not crazy, but a lot of them are calorie dense foods that people don't count. So when we talk to this lady, or man, it's probably a lady given the caloric maintenance level, when we add in that 1,000 calories of unaccounted for foods to what their perceived intake is of 1,350, we have our maintenance calories. So when we add that into our energy balance equation, net change 0. I'm not saying this is what's always going on. Sometimes they're revving a little bit lower, but this is a very common issue because people don't understand how much those BLTs can really contribute to the lack of result and sometimes weight gain. Case study number 2. This one's near and dear to me because this is how I think. This is something this is more up my alley. So maintenance would be 3,200 calories. So for them to, the recommended amount for their fat loss goal, they're going to start at 2,800. Their perceived intake is 2,800. They're compliant. And they are compliant. So, Monday they're a little bit lower, Tuesday a little bit higher, but it pretty much averages out where they should be for the day. And this is what it looks like. So they're actually creating a caloric deficit of 2,750 calories in a week. That's pretty good because we're going to have exercise on top of that. That's just from food. So everything looks great, except for this person does 1 cheat meal per week. And I took this, has anyone been to the Works, that burger joint? I could do this easily. So they get one of the burgers, they get some sweet potato fries. Fries are useless if there's nothing to dip them in. They have 1 alcoholic beverage at dinner. Then they go back, let's say that this is a date night, they go back with their spouse, they have a glass of wine and they're like, oh, you know what, I really want a dessert, but I'm too cheap to pay $11 for a milkshake. So I'm just gonna have 7 squares of the dark chocolate that we have in the cupboard. That's it. That tallies 2,440 extra calories. We toss that in, and they're only running a weekly deficit of roughly 300 calories. Guys, that could be a rounding error. Remember, this isn't an exact science. So 300 is it's not enough that they're gonna see enough of a result. And so they're really net negative. So you could use both of these analogies to see how somebody might actually be overeating in terms of how they might gain weight, especially when you look at this model and you think of Thanksgiving weekends, where someone has a large weekend where they eat that way for a while. Or how the BLTs can really add up over the course of a year for somebody. So this is where the word compliancy really matters, because a lot of people think of compliancy as, they got all their meals, but for some reason they're not losing weight. And it's because they're forgetting that on a meal-to-meal basis, someone can be compliant, but they're not necessarily compliant from an absolute intake perspective in terms of calories. So for this person, 5 meals per day, 7 meals per week, they do 35 meals per week. Remember, they only have 1 cheat meal. So for 34 meals out of the 35, they're compliant. That's a 97% compliancy on a meal-to-meal basis. So if your only method is that you're only looking at, did you get this meal right? Did you get this meal right? Did you get this meal right? And you're not accounting for any of the extra things like their treat meals, or there's no accountability for the extras, you can start to run into a system where you're like, I'm doing everything right, but it doesn't seem to be working. So let's talk about how we lose fat. This is the simplest model that I can show you, and this is how I would try to frame it to a client so that they understand what's going on. So we know how we're pushing fat in there. Now let's talk about how it comes out. So when you talk to somebody about a caloric deficit, this is kind of the model that I would say, hey, this is all we're trying to do. This is why it's so important that you're accountable for your treat meals, cheat meal, whatever you want to call it, or all those BLTs. Because if we're not satisfying this, it's not going to happen. We have our fat cell with that reservoir that we need to get those fatty acids out of there. And how we do that is, well, this is 100% of someone's output for the day. The orange is what we've consumed. The red is the deficit that we have. If we have a deficit, the fat cell shrinks because we're pulling fatty acids out to fill the deficit for energy. It's that simple, and sometimes a simple visual or a simple explanation like that will really help clients understand the importance of the accountability of BLTs. When you show them, hey, it's this easy to not hit your goals, and if we're not hitting your targets, we're not drawing fat out of the fat cell, we're not depleting that reservoir, it's not going to shrink. So now let's talk about some of the different strategies and methods that we can use for our clients to help get there. So we've all seen, these are very common methods. I mean, you could toss in Mediterranean, Paleo, a lot of them will kind of get it, will fall underneath these. These are just ones based off of macronutrients. A lot of the different diets that are out there kind of fall under these categories. So we have our balanced, low carb, ultra low carb, which you could think about ketogenic diet would be one, low fat approach and ultra low fat approach. A little less common nowadays, still seen in medicine a little bit. So for these, generally as a trainer, you need to remember whatever you're recommending, you're going to be liable for in terms of where did you get this information and why. So as trainers, if you're just a trainer and you're not a dietitian, you need to be more if you're going to contradict with somebody that, for lack of a better term, outranks you in an industry, specifically with nutrition, you should be very mindful that you're the one left holding the liability. So I tend to recommend that trainers don't recommend ultra low carb diets or ultra low fat diets unless they're going to work with an allied healthcare practitioner, because you need to be mindful of, at the end of the day, who's accountable, who's holding the liability. If a liability was a stick that you had to hold, you don't want to be left holding it. It's like a game of musical chairs, or maybe you could think of an analogy like that. You don't want to be the one holding the accountability. With a balanced diet, low carb diet, and a low fat diet, all of those diets, you can find information that'll kind of, through good nutritional governing bodies, that'll kind of give you a framework there that you can work within. It's when you start getting ultra low with different macronutrients that you start kind of getting out of the scope. It's a little less safe from a liability perspective. If you want to do it, work with a naturopath, work with a dietitian that tends to do that stuff. That way you're not the one holding the accountability or the liability. So after we've determined with somebody what's going to be their ideal fit, is it going to be a low carb, balanced, low fat? When I say low fat, I don't mean we're talking maybe 20% of their caloric intake comes from fat. Low carb is technically, people define it as 100 grams ish. Depends on your size. So then we can determine their meal frequency. Are we going to have less meals, more meals? And I'll get into how you determine this stuff in a second. I'm just kind of showing the different things that you can manipulate to build more of a custom plan. So then we have intermittent fasting. So I'm not a fasting expert, but I can definitely tell you a lot of the benefits around fasting. I don't do full day fasts. I'm a hungry guy. So you can definitely do alternating day fasts. The eat, stop, eat method, I think that's Brad Peon kind of made that popular. Then there's the lean gains and warrior diet. I recommend trainers, if somebody already skips breakfast, this might be applicable to them in terms of the lean gain or the warrior diet, because they're already not eating it. If they're the type of person like, oh, when I eat breakfast, I just feel so sick. If there's no reason to add the breakfast in, like they're not doing, if they want to do a 7 a.m. CrossFit WOD, maybe that's maybe we want to have breakfast around there. But it's okay if you want to use either of those methods. With the alternate day fasting and eat, stop, eat, because they're such a long fast, I would work with an allied healthcare practitioner who tends to specialize with that stuff. You have to start at those lengths of fast. You start have to worrying or considering blood glucose levels. If their blood sugar drops and they're driving or doing something, that can be a big issue. I personally know of somebody that's happened to them. They drove up a curb and into a McDonald's sign. It was bad, and it's because they were dramatically under eating. So for those ones, I would be mindful of the liability. I would work with an allied healthcare practitioner. Lean gains, warrior diet, definitely make those work. This is just saying that technically when you sleep, because a lot of people don't realize this, that counts towards your fast. So this isn't wake time, so it's not 24 hours, they eat, stop, eat, it's not 24 hours awake on top of your sleep. And then we get into manipulating macronutrients. So this is a basic carb cycling approach. A lot of people do this and they don't even realize that they're doing it. The whole concept of carb cycling is all we're doing is manipulating when we're eating carbs to eat them at a more favorable time. So in this example, all a person might be doing is you might say to your client, hey, you get to have an extra serving of oats or a banana or whatever it is, an extra serving of carbs after your workout. That's carb cycling. On one day I have a little bit extra, one day I don't. One meal I have a little bit extra than some of the other meals. Basic carb cycling, fairly novice people can still do something like that, if that's something that fits them, which we'll get into in a second. Then we have alternating training days and non-training days. So on non-training days, they're consuming 100 grams. On training days, they're consuming 230 grams. Again, this is just a sample, so you can see that there's a wave between the different carb cycling days. I'm just letting that, okay, got it. Okay, then we have the 5-2 model. This one became really popular. I think it was, is Ken in the room? Oh, he left. 1990s, late 80s, Mauro Di Pasquale kind of pioneered this approach. The concept is, for a lot of people, Monday to Friday are low carb, and then the weekend you get to have a little bit extra carbs. Where people often go wrong here is that it's not just carbs that they're having extra, it's a bunch of other things like, pizza also has a lot of fat and other things and things like that. So it's not a cheat weekend or something like that. It's just extra carbs over the course of the weekend. Then we have the refeed model, which is low carb throughout the week, but then you have 1 day a week, or it could be every 10 days, it could be every 14 days, where you have a large serving of carbohydrates for each meal throughout the entire day. Okay. And the last one I'm going to talk about is the concept of carb backloading. This works really, really well for a lot of clients. The concept is that willpower is like a muscle, and it fatigues as the day goes on. So by the time you get to the evening, that's when it's the weakest. You don't have very much left. And that tends to also be when people tend to be the hungriest. It's either they haven't eaten enough for the day, or maybe they just have some sort of craving that they're dealing with. And a lot of people tend to overeat. And that also seems to be, has anyone heard the rule? What was it that people say? No meals after dinner. Mm-hmm. It's a really common one. It doesn't always fit everyone. If you have that person that skipped breakfast, so a lot of people are like, oh, I can't eat breakfast. I get sick. But then I know that Women's Fitness Magazine told me not to eat after dinner. So I skip breakfast, but then I don't eat after dinner, and I'm just ravished at night. So the concept here is that we're going to give them a little bit of extra carbohydrates in the evening. That also increases the number of calories in that meal to make them more satisfied. And this is what this might look like. Basically, the last meal of the day, they have an extra 30 grams of carbs there. Okay, so now let's talk about those methods, strategies, and let's talk about creating a model. So this isn't, so when I first wrote this, I was like creating a model. Are people going to confuse this with like creating like a model? But you guys get it. So we're going to create a model. So it's a customized approach for your client. And how can we look at customizing that approach? Because remember, the first pillar is compliancy. If they don't do it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you think ketogenic diet is going to be the most optimal diet for this person. If they're not willing to do it, it doesn't mean anything. So our DTS client matrix, essentially we look at how much does this person understand about nutrition and food. And then we look at what's their capacity. Capacity would be, think about their time, the amount of time that they can commit to doing something, and also their desire. Like, do they want to do, how much time will they put into meal prepping? Even if they have the time, they may not really have the desire to do certain things as well, which can really matter. So our type 1 strategy, for our type 1, our strategy, so this is somebody who's highly knowledgeable, has the time and the desire. You could pretty much choose any eating method that suits their schedule or what they prefer. You can pretty much pick any eating pattern. Again, they have an idea of what they know what they're doing. And then we have our tracking methods, which is just, are they going to look at portion sizes, or are they actually going to look at their macronutrients? Okay, then we have our type 2. So this person doesn't know much about nutrition, but they have the desire and the time. So for them, we're going to look at probably a low carb or a balanced. Those are just the two easiest ones for somebody to grasp. It's fairly easy for somebody to go to the Keg steakhouse and notice, they can say, that's a potato, that's rice, those are carbs. It's a lot harder to do a lower fat strategy because that's really easy to hide in food. A balanced approach can also be done there too, where they're just trying to kind of average out their plate. Now for an eating pattern with these people, it tends to be a little bit of a lower frequency because they just have to get the rhythm in terms of preparing their foods and really assessing everything out. You could definitely use, if they skip breakfast, you could use a morning fasting approach, and you could use a carb cycling approach where they just have some extra carbs on workout days, or you could even teach them to do it on weekends where they have a little bit of extra time. And for this person, rather than getting them to do all the math and learn, because they're already learning a ton here, a portion-based approach is probably more than enough. Okay, for type 3, so this person knows what they're doing, they don't have time. So because they know what they're doing, the easiest thing to do when they can identify what things are probably carrying more fat, they can identify carbohydrates. The easiest thing when someone doesn't have time is to just reduce one. So you can do a lower carb, lower fat approach, whichever fits their lifestyle better or their preference. You can do a low or high meal frequency, whichever one they tend to prefer. You can use a skip breakfast model if you want, and then you could also do some sort of carb cycling, which is additional workouts. Keep it simple, because remember, they don't have a ton of time. And for this person, it may be the same amount of time to measure a portion as it would be to do their macronutrients. So you could use either one there, because again, they'll be able to identify their macros. And we have our last one. These are the hardest clients, and these are probably, I don't know, 25, 35% of the, at least 1/3 of the clients that we'll tend to work with. They don't know much, and they don't have a ton of time or desire. So for these people, the nutrition strategy that's probably going to be the best is low carb. Again, it's just easy to identify on your plate. That's a potato, that's rice, different things like that. For the eating pattern, probably a lower meal frequency. They just don't have the time to commit to eating more meals or to making those extra meals, and it's okay if they skip breakfast. And for these people, it's probably going to be a basic portion method where they just make sure that their portions match on their plate. So this brings me to this concept. When a lot of people have taken the lean body course, they've said that this has kind of been their biggest takeaway, and it's basically factoring in, we all know that life is going to happen. That's a common saying that people talk about. So the easiest thing to do would be to actually factor in the life is going to happen. So that's where we come up with the life allowance. Essentially what we're going to do is give somebody a cash budget. So if you could imagine, somebody can't control, they spend all their entire paycheck. They can't control their finances. So what they do, a common thing would be, you don't get to touch your bank account. You have to go draw the cash out. That's your spending cash for the week. You don't get to touch, once that's gone, it's gone. So that's the same kind of model that we're going to use here. We're going to take out a chunk of their weekly total, and that's going to be their allowance that they're allowed to spend throughout the week. So when things come up like birthdays, date nights, things like that, there's some room there where they have a budget that allows them to enjoy life still. So let's look at an example here. Here we have Beth. She's a busy mom. She's a manager, 165 pounds. That puts her probably her starting calories around 2,000. That's probably a 12 or 13 pound multiplier. So this is what it would look like. We take her 1,980 calories times 90%. So 1,782 calories is the amount that you would use when you're actually structuring her meal plan. So when you're actually saying, hey, this is what we're going to eat per day, that's the number that she's going to receive. The second step is to determine what their weekly allowance is and then explain to them, this is how your weekly allowance is going to work. So all we do is take her original total calories number, times it by 7. We have her total weekly calories at 13,860. All we do is take 10% of that. It's just what's left. So this person has 1,386 calories of a weekly allowance. So however they want, if it's the type of person that's like, oh, you know what, I like to have a little bit of chocolate each evening, or I like to, I need a little bit of dessert, just even if it's this tiny amount, each day, or if there's someone like me, I could do this all, I would probably blow it all in one meal, maybe two. You could do either one. So if this person decided to do it over the course each day, they get a budget of roughly 200 calories per day. Okay, so now for those of you that are looking for a training approach, our FLIP system. So I'll give you a little bit of a history about our FLIP system. FLIP's fat loss programming system was inspired from peripheral heart action training. Peripheral heart action training, the concept is that you're trying to get constant movement during the workout so that you're maximizing the amount of energy expenditure. And to do that, you're going to alternate between upper body and lower body extremities. So you do your legs, then you do your upper body, lower body, upper body. And generally it was about four or five exercises that they would run through in a circuit series. That also creates a more favorable hormonal environment for fat loss. The science on that's a little bit back and forth, but it's more favorable. How much, I don't know, because it creates full body lactate. So what we do a little bit different. It's still a total body program. We do 6 exercises, but it's in a superset model. So it's 2 exercises at a time, 3 to 4 working sets per exercise, 8 to 20 repetitions. The number of repetitions will be relative to how demanding the exercise is. They're medium and slow tempos because we want to get as much time under tension as we can. 30 seconds rest between exercises and a minute to 2 minutes of rest between supersets. So for those of you that know, has anyone done any Charles Poliquin stuff? Yeah, so it's very similar to the German body comp style. What makes the FLIP system different is that it's driven by someone's assessment. So I don't have time to go through the entire assessment today. That's 3 days that we go through in our level 1 course plus all the online that's before. But essentially how you'd select the exercises that you put in would be driven from your assessment. I'm going to give you guys an example of how it might look. I don't have an assessment that I'm going to run through, but I'll give you an idea of what it might look like when we structure it. So this is kind of the model. We have our lower body posterior, upper body posterior. I believe if you're familiar with the German body composition program, he would generally pair lower body posterior with upper body anterior. The reason we do this different, this is designed more for a novice intermediate level. It's easier when you're teaching somebody who's never trained before if you can keep your cues similar. So when you're cueing a pulling exercise, it's just a better coaching protocol as a trainer because you're going to mirror some of the cues. Even though it's a different upper body versus lower body, some of the cues will be similar, and it's still a pulling pattern. Okay, then we get into our lower body anterior, upper body anterior for our B1, B2, and then we get into our auxiliary. The auxiliary is really like the remedial lifts. They're really this is where the longevity and pain-free living really comes in, because if you have an opportunity that you need to work on, that's where it would slide in. And then we finish the workout with some metabolic work. So whatever is left in the tank after all of this, we try to expend it near the end. Now you may have somebody that, for lack of a better term, they're a motor moron. They don't have very good movement skills. So they struggle with maintaining a certain load, so you have to really slow down, use tempo training, and try to teach them tension. But they may not be getting, the weight training portion of the workout for those people may not be as demanding as it could be. This is something that really kicks in. So even if you spend a lot of time teaching up here and the demand is a little bit lower, when they finish the workout, because the last 10 minutes are hard, they say, oh man, that was a good workout. Even though it was the only last 10 minutes, they will still, it's a recency bias. They finish and they think, man, that was good, even though it was just the last little bit. But everything above still contributes to their longevity, pain-free living, fat loss long-term. So let's see what this might look like when we actually use it. So here's just a list of lower body posterior, upper body posterior, and anterior exercises. These are ones that we would probably select for a novice to intermediate level trainee. And all we're going to do is grab one, toss it in. We'll look at A2, toss in a seated row, toss in a front foot elevated split squat, toss in a flat dumbbell press with a neutral grip, a hip thruster for some extra glute work, and to teach them extension. And then we're going to get into some bracing exercises. We'll add in a farmer's carry. Now for the finisher, all of you today, if you're interested in it, you can grab our DTS little black book of finishers for free. It's something that we have free currently on our website, but I'll give you a link so it's a little bit more accessible and less steps for you guys. So the big takeaways that I hope you had from this session are you have to create a caloric deficit. If you can again, picture that fat cell, that reservoir. If you're not creating a caloric deficit, doesn't matter if you're on a ketogenic diet and you're optimal fat burning, if there's no deficit, you're still not drawing from that reservoir. You need to create a custom plan. So really assess your client, what strategy would be best for them? Is there a method that would fit well? How can I blend this to their schedule so that it really fits them? And then the last thing would be to make sure that you're optimizing their training regime. I just gave you guys the FLIP system. There's lots of different fat loss systems that are great. This is just the one that we use because it's assessment driven and it fits the model of longevity and pain-free living. So I'd like to ask you guys, I'd like to get the top, I'd like to get 5 of you to give me your top takeaway, if I could. Does anyone want to give me a takeaway?
I really like the creating that like 10% of like,
the life allowance? Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah.
A lot of my clients come in with a mindset of like all or nothing, and so that gives them the ability to live a little.
Yeah, it's going to happen. Yeah, there you go. That's for you.
Sweet, thanks.
Yep.
The BLTs, that was good.
The bites, licks, and tastes. Yeah, that's my wife. I'm not that creative. Here you go. Yep.
The programming is amazing, that upper lower. Like I've used it before. I've done DTS stuff forever, but like with a client who's in the gym for the first time, it can be a really great teaching moment because you can take your time. Here's a lower body, here's an upper body, and then I use it on some of my most advanced clients for fat loss.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. So you can make the rest times like next to none because their lower body's resting and they can go into upper. So
yeah. So I put 30 to 60 in there because that's for intermediate. As soon as the foundation of strength starts to increase, they're going to be a little bit more recovery time, just because they're tapping into more motor units are getting recruited. But for novice trainees, somebody that's never started before, that's never trained, it's excellent. Yep. Sorry.
That would be the plug and play with the program. You have a list of upper body, lower body, remedial, auxiliary exercises, as well as finishers, and then it's just plug and play. I find that'll make programming a lot simpler process.
So yeah, so that's how I try to get trainers to think about it. Because I mean, if you're going to be training, 8 clients a day, 8 or 10 hours of training, you want to have good programming, but it has to be time efficient. So that's kind of the model that we use. I use a very similar model doing meal plans. If you could imagine the same idea, you'll have your list of proteins with different numbers, and all you do is you go to the spreadsheet, highlight, I want 25 serving, grab it, go to your other spreadsheet, plug it in. It auto calculates. It's great. Yeah. If you can do the more plug-in stuff you can do, the better. And I'll toss you. Are you okay? There we go. Yep. Sorry. Yep. Yep.
Okay. I really like your matrix because I've worked with some people and they've been that type 4 and it's been a struggle. But the way that you're suggesting, like this would be more effective for them to focus in on.
Yeah.
That's really.
It's trying to keep it. It's trying to keep it simple. It's just trying to
narrow it down.
Yeah. Good. Great. Do you want me to pass it to you? Or? There you go. There we go. Okay, I'm out of things, but if anyone else has anything to say.
Yeah, well, 2 things actually about the whole presentation. One of it, like, I really love, even though I use it and every visual likes it, it's great for the chart about all the additives people have during the day. Right?
Oh yeah.
That's great if people think or consider about it, right? Secondly, for everyone that's kind of new to getting into lean body fundamentals or such, the fact that you use the 5-2 terminology and the warrior diet, right? Those books have probably read between 12 and 18 years ago.
They're old books. Yeah. They're still good. Yeah.
Time ago, the warrior diet was my first introduction to investing in like early 2000s, right? So people know, given better that those concepts are not new, right? That like if they work, right? It's not like yesterday someone wrote about intermittent fasting in this magazine. This new concept, but I mean things work. But there's a compliance perspective to it. One more thing is that do you guys take into consideration the fact of the psychological aspect that can happen from doing something like the 5-2 diet? For example, if you consume in a high deficit during the week, and then overconsume the weekend, that could lead to a very bad habit of yo-yo dieting or even like bulimia or something like that.
So I'd recommend that people don't operate in extremes.
Yes.
So I don't recommend extreme deficits with extreme overeating. if I was dealing with a competitor, maybe that, that'd be the only time that would be something that's different than what we're talking about here. Yeah, but I mean, like, if somebody's eating 100, 150 grams of carbs per day, that's satisfying. Like, that's not terrible. And then when you bump it up to 250 on the weekend, you know what I mean? We're not talking huge changes here. It's like a little bit extra on the weekends. And they're just on the hook for understanding this much during this time, this much during that time. You're on the hook for making sure that the math is right. Yeah. And to your first point, the reason I don't say, hey, this diet is the best is because a lot of these diets, a lot of them, there's some that I'm like, I don't really recommend that one. But a lot of them do work, and it's because whatever model that they're using. So let's say anyone can go to Chapters and grab a diet book off the shelf, and each of those diet books has had people that have been successful on it. I don't know what the ratios are. I don't know if every diet on average, if every diet book there has a 15, 20%, 25% success rate. But the reality is there are people that are successful on it, and then there's a large chunk of people that aren't. And it's just a matter of your job is to try to say, which one fits this person better that they're more likely to be successful. Obviously, you're going to pick the ones that are, longevity, pain-free living first, that fit kind of that lens. Anything else? Yep.
I just had a question about what do you think about using ketosis strips to document fat burning to check.
So you can be in ketosis and not be losing fat. So do you know what I mean there? So if I'm not creating a deficit, if you're trying to be in ketosis, so if you're trying to be in ketosis, they're okay. I would prefer someone does the actually assesses their blood. It's way more accurate. I don't love ketone strips for urination, but you can actually measure it with your blood. I would, if I was going to go down that route, I have a few different naturopaths that I work with, and I would generally bring them on board so that they can kind of, honestly, I just pass the liability stick to them. They give them the like, hey, this is the do's and don'ts of being on a ketogenic diet. Then they come back to me, and then I kind of work within the scope that they gave the client, and I can start tweaking it from there. That's how I work towards it. But I don't use ketogenic diets a ton. I find that people really struggle. It's if you're really doing it right and you're actually trying to be in ketosis, like clinical ketosis, not just, there's nutritional ketosis, then we get into clinical ketosis, and then they're like, oh man, I forgot, I in the middle of the night I ate one M&M. Fucked. Like it's, pardon my, like, so I don't use it because I just find it's less, it's hard. It's hard, and I deal a lot with general population. So, yep.
I 100% agree with you because I feel the same thing when I converted to being a vegan. Because at first I thought it's just a diet, but later on I realized that it's not a diet but a lifestyle change. So same like that, it's how you actually change the whole lifestyle towards it, and then sometimes you don't know that. Eventually I realized I was not doing it wrong, and then I had so much medical issues regarding that, you know what I mean? So because I was not actually going to my family doctor to consult and to go through based on what fits my body.
Yep.
I just went to what is good, like doing research, videos, YouTube. You're right, it's good to go to somebody who knows better.
Yeah, so I understand, people are vegan and vegetarian, and I know how to do it, but even then, I still generally have them consult with at least their family doctor or naturopath so that they can get their blood iron and a couple of different things looked at. And again, I'm just saying, hey, you should probably deal with somebody to get this looked at. It's not my scope of practice. I'm very much scope of practice, stay within your wheelhouse. And honestly, if you create a referral network, it only comes back to you. Yeah. Okay, guys, so I'll take some more questions. I just want to make sure that I give this to you guys now. So the Little Black Book of Finishers, for any of you that want to grab that, guys, it's free. It's just a bunch of, if you're using a fat loss protocol system and you want to toss in some finishers there, that's where you can add in quite a bit of variety with your clients. So, you can just grab the book and say, okay, today we're going to do that one. They're all designed, most people will be able to do most of them. Okay, you can also, I haven't added this coupon yet. It'll be available as of 4 p.m. Pardon? It expires tomorrow, yep. So you can grab, if you just want to see what this looks like, if you're actually giving somebody a transformation plan, how it all comes together, you can grab the 12-week lean body transformation plan for $37. It's regularly $149. And you just use the coupon code LEANSTRONG in your checkout. And then right now we're actually running a sale. We've been running it for the last week. It's spring 2019. You can get 50% off of any of our kind of body transformation programs. So lean body coach certification is one of those, and you can also get a 50% off of the DTS hypertrophy fundamentals course. And again, both of these expire June 2nd, tomorrow at midnight. Are there any other questions? I could go on another nerd safari if we would like to. I'm not actually sure what time my session runs till. I started late, so I wasn't.
You're kind of done.
I figured. Okay. Perfect. Okay, guys, that's it. Thank you so much for coming. Pardon?
You're done.
I thought so. I was like, am I going till 4?